We are working on the Connect 4 project from the YByte Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. Having built the code for the player turn and the computer's turn, now it's time for us to put it all together and build the entire game loop. In fact, the game flow is quite interesting, not very hard. This flowchart kind of captures it. So the game starts and the player makes a move. Of course, it could be player, it could be computer, but in this case, I just take it to be player. The basic structure doesn't change. After the player plays a move, we ask ourselves a question: has the player won? If the player has won, that means if if the answer here is yes, then the game gets over. On the other hand, if the answer is no, then the other party gets a turn, which means it's the computer's turn. Next, I get to the computer. Same question. After this turn, has the computer won? Yes, the game gets over. No, the player gets to turn. So that's basically what goes on here. Basically, there are two important points here. Number one, that the player's turn and the computer's turn alternates. So once the player plays, once the computer plays, and so on. And the second important point is that after every move, we check if the player has won or say the computer has won. So after player's turn, we check for player winning. After computer's turn, we check for computer's winning. Yeah. Now, really, like I said, it could be we could interchange these two. Computer could play here, in which case we check computer one. Player could play here, we will check player one. Now you might wonder, why is it that we are checking for player one or computer one even in the first few moves? Because it's not possible to win unless there are at least 4 coins on the board. That's true, but just that doesn't change the basic game loop, because for the first few times we just keep returning a no over here. So the loop works quite nicely. Now, in order for us to operationalize all of this, we are going to make use of two global variables. First variable called turn, this is going to be an integer. So I will give it value of say 1 and 2. Turn being 1 implies it's a player's turn. Turn being 2 implies it's a computer's turn. That's just my definition. And we'll also use the Boolean variable, global one, to called game over. And we set it to false, obviously, in the beginning. But this will be set to true if either of these guys win this. Now we will set this outside any function so that the scope is global. But of course, we'll modify them inside the functions as well. We'll use the global keyword. Now, let's just look at it briefly. What are the changes that I need to make to the player turn? Well, fundamentally, like I said, after a chance is played, we need to check if the player has won. If the player has won, the game must be made to get over. And if the player has not won, then the chance must shift to the computer. So that's kind of what the flowchart said. We'll see this in the code. But a very, very important point is that once the game is over, no matter where I click the mouse, there should be no effect whatsoever. Now, if I do not do this, then you will find that the game is over, but the player is still able to, let's say, place the coins on the board, which doesn't make sense. So we need to, we'll just see, as we discuss this, we'll first start with this, and then we will go to, let's say, the first 3 points. How do I make sure that once the game is over, let's say the player clicks don't have any, let's say, effect? Well, it's quite simple. In fact, we can use the return statement. Remember, one usage of return statement is to make the function exit before it is over. So in this case, basically, we'll just say, okay, look, this is the play XY. We have a lot of things to do, all right. But in case the game is over, which has been set from somewhere else, I will just return. So basically, I won't do anything. I will just return from here. In fact, we can see this in action. We can code this much and then come back to code the remaining part. So I come here to my, my game that I've been developing. First thing first, I define two variables. Let me do it, let's say, here. So I define two variables, let's say turn. So I just set it to 1, let's say, and I just define a variable called, let's say, game, say over, and I just set it to false. So now, remember, these are global because they are defined outside functions. But I will get to my play over here and I'll just say, look, I may need to modify these variables. So I just call, let's say, global, say turn, comma, let's say game over. Remember, because I may want to modify these variables inside a function. Now, like I said, I will say, I'll just tell this that, look, if the game is over, we will return immediately. Because we don't want this to proceed further since the game is already over. If, on the other hand, the game is not over, well, the player gets to play as earlier, which means player clicks on, let's say, a certain part of the, let's say, of the screen. We figure out which column we are in, and we just go back to our flowchart. So after having played, I ask myself, look, have I won this game? Notice I am using a function which I'm yet to define. I just call it check winner. I am passing an argument of one because remember, one implies for the player, one means a player. So in case the player has won, I just set game over to true and I print player wins. Else, I set my turn to two. And if turn has been set to two, I go and, let's say, give the chance to the computer. So let's just build this as well. I just come in here. So notice, basically, at this point, after having played my turn, I will just so check for winner. And obviously, this function is yet to be defined. So I'll just go and say, well, look, if say check, winner, say one, then well, game over is true because player has won this, and I can go and set, for example, print, let's say, player wins. Now, on the other hand, if this is not the case, which means the player has not won it, so my check winner will return a boolean. If that is not the case, I will, let's say, set the turn to say 2. Once I am done with this, I ask myself a question. If turn is equal to 2, well, then that's the player, let's say, I basically need to pass the turn to the computer. Now this code is actually quite interesting. Basically, I allow my player to click anywhere on the screen. If the game is over, I just return, I don't do anything. If not, then I proceed with the turn. I, play the coin as at the lowest available row. Um, and having done that, I check for a winner. If there's a winner, I end the game as expected. If not, I set the turn to 2. And if turn is 2, I hand the chance over to the computer. So remember, that was my flowchart. Now moving on to the computer, in fact, it's quite similar. Basically, I'll need to modify these two variables. Once again, I'll check for winner. This time, however, with 2. If player has won, so if the computer has won, then again the game over is true. I said computer is winning and I set turn to 1. Now we will talk about this a little bit, which is what I'm trying to, highlight here. So I just have to define, for example, global, let's say game over and say turn. And it's really quite similar to what we are doing earlier. I just asked myself a question. Look, if my computer is winning the game, then the game has to get over. So I just go and say, well, look, if check, check winner, let's say 2 is true. So check winner is a function we are yet to define. I just go and say set game over to, let's say, true. And I just print, for example, print, let's say, computer wins. On the other hand, if this is not the case, I set my turn to, let's say, in fact, there is something very interesting going on here. You notice that when I look at my play XY, that's basically working with the player clicking anywhere on the screen. There is nowhere on this code where I'm checking for turn being equal to 1. You notice there's nowhere I'm checking for turn equal to 1. However, at the end of play C, I must still set my turn to 1. The reason is as follows. In fact, this is quite interesting. Just imagine a situation where the game is not over, but one particular column has gotten over and the player happens to click on exactly that column. Now, what will happen in that case? Remember, my column is no longer available, which means that I do not want the player to hand over the chance to the computer. That will not happen because remember, my turn is 1 and I will basically do nothing. On the other hand, if I did not, let's say, set my turn to 1 at the end of computer turn, basically the game would proceed even if the player is clicking on a completely failed column, and that is not correct. That's why I'm doing it this way. This will become much more clearer as we move forward, as we start building the check winner and the different conditions start coming together. But the basic loop, I hope, is clear to you. I hope you are seeing how we are implementing the flowchart that we discussed in this code. I hope you found this video interesting. In general, if you think learning through building activities is something you enjoy, look at our website www.ybyte.in. We have many activities through which we learn Python programming. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.